اشفع لنا من القرآن يا الله. نسألك يا من هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر الخالق البارئ المصور الغفار القهار الوهاب الرزاق الفتاح العليم القابض الباسط الخافض الرافع المعز المذل السميع البصير الحكم العدل اللطيف الخبير الحليم العظيم الغفور الشكور العلي الكبير الحفيظ المقيت الحسيب الجليل الكريم الرقيب المجيب الواسع الحكيم الودود المجيد الباعث الشهيد الحق الوكيل القوي المتين الولي الحميد المحسن المبدئ المعيد المحيي المميت الحي القيوم الواجد الماجد الواحد الأحد الصمد القادر المقتدر المقدم المؤخر الأول الآخر الظاهر الباطن الوالي المتعالي البر التواب المنتقم العفو الرؤوف مالك الملك ذو الجلال والإكرام المقسط الجامع الغني المغني المانع الضار النافع النور الهادي البديع الباقي الوارث الرشيد الصبور اللهم صل أفضل الصلاة على أسعد مخلوقاتك سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك كلما ذكرك ذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون.
Good evening once again and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. On behalf of the organizer, it is my pleasure to welcome all distinguished guests, Emeritus Professor Stephen Freeland, Honorary Director and Chair of the International Institute of Space Law, IISL Moot Court Committee, which organized the Manfred Lachs Space Law Moot Court Competition. Yang berusaha Dr. Muhammad Fairuz Asilam, Malaysia Space Regulator MOSTI, yang berusaha Dr. Cik Zuhaida Saari, Lecturer of Space Law and Advisor of this program, Encik Amir Rizal Bidin, Vice President of Yayasan Inovasi Malaysia, members of the academia, invited guests and dear students. Welcome to today's talk entitled Promoting the Rule of Law, the Wonders of Mooting and the Future of International Space Law. We are honored by your presence and we hope this session will inspire deeper engagement in the development of space law in Malaysia and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, to bless our program this evening, we would like to invite Muhammad Amirul Haziq Muhammad Shukri from the Faculty of Sharia and Law to lead the recitation of dua. Please welcome.
Test. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Linnabil karim wa ala alihi wa ashabil kiramil fatihah. A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Allahumma ja'al jam'ana hadha jam'an marhuma wa tafarruqana min ba'dihi tafarruqan ma'suma wa la taj'alillahumma fina wa la ma'ana wa la man yatba'una shaqiyyan wa la matrudan wa la mahruma. Allahumma ja'al khaira a'malina akhirahu wa khaira a'malina khawatimuhu wa khaira ayyamina yawma alqaka fih. Allahumma ighfir lana dhunubana wal ikhwanina alladhina sabaquna bil iman wa la taj'al fi qulubina ghillan lil ladzina amanu rabbana innaka raufur rahim. We gather today to express gratitude upon your greatest gift towards us. In conjunction with this assembly, we ask for your help and guidance. Ya Allah, kindly give us strength and courage to face all the struggles and gain a wide range of knowledge. Kindly bestow blessings, physical and spiritual health, fitness of mind, peace of mind and strength of spirit. Allahumma ya Aziz ya Qahhar, Ya Allah, give strength to our teachers and our leaders to continue to serve for people, society, nation and religion. Ya Allah, make our country a country that got the blessing, everlasting peace and prosperity of all time. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina azaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Amin amin ya rabbal alamin. Thank you Muhammad Amirul Haziq for the recitation of dua just now. To officially commence our program, it is now my honor to invite Yang Berusaha Dr. Cik Zuhaida Saari, Lecturer of Space Law and Advisor of the Space Talk program, to deliver the opening address and to officiate the Space Law Talk. Please welcome her with a round of applause.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon to all. Our distinguished guest speaker, Emeritus Professor Stephen Freeland, Honorary Director and Chair of International Institute of Space Law, Moot Committee, which organized the Manfred Lachs Space Law Moot competition, Dr. Muhammad Fairuz Asilam, Malaysia Space Regulator, Space Regulatory Division, MOSTI, Encik Amir Rizal Bidin, Vice President of Yayasan Inovasi Malaysia, dear lecturers, guests and students. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and great pleasure to welcome all of you to the Space Law Talks with our distinguished speaker, Emeritus Professor Freeland, who is internationally recognized as one of the leading voices in the field of international space law, space justice, and the developments of global legal framework for outer space governance. This space law thought entitled Promoting the Rule of Law, the Wonders of Mooting and the Future of International Space Law, organized by the Outer Space Law class, LAC 5493, Academic Session 8251, Faculty of Sharia Law, USIM, with the supports of Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation through BP Angkasa, and in strategic collaboration with Yayasan Inovasi Malaysia. This program reflects USIM's commitment to nurturing young legal minds in a highly specialized and rapidly developing area, international and space law, especially as Malaysia advances its legal and regulatory infrastructure following the enactment of the Malaysian Space Board Act 2022 at 834. I would also like to record our deepest appreciation to Dr. Muhammad Fairuz and the BP Angkasa teams for facilitating and supporting this physical engagement today, and for opening the door for our students to directly interact with international experts, and your present guidance, continued trust in USIM efforts have enabled our outer space law class to grow beyond the classroom into a real ecosystem of education, regulation, and professional exposures. This thought is particularly meaningful for our students as it prepares them for their involvement in the Malaysian Space Law Moot competition, PMPA, as well as future international mooting platform such as the Manfred Space Law Moot competitions. As a lecturer and a program advisor, I'm very proud to say that this outer space law class is not only academic in nature, but also experiential. It is designed to develop our students into future policy shaper, negotiators, and legal advisors in the space sectors. Having you here today, Prof, it's offered them a first-hand opportunity to understand how space governance and the rule of law are negotiated on the world stage. And to all our students, I hope you will maximize these opportunities, listen deeply, and ask thoughtful questions. The future of our space governance depends not only on technology, but on ethical leaderships, okay? Legal foresights and responsible stewardships, qualities that mooting and capacity building programs like this are designed to cultivate. Professor Freeland, thank you for generously accepting our invitation and for continuously supporting Malaysia in developing our national talent pipeline in space law. With that, I once again warmly welcome everyone. May this session be beneficial, enlightening, and enriching to all of us, and may it inspire stronger commitment towards the peaceful, just, and sustainable use of outer space. With the permission of the organizer, I hereby declare the Space Law Talk officially open. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cik Zuhaida, for the meaningful remarks. So, ladies and gentlemen, we now move to the highlight of today's event, the talk by our distinguished speaker. I would now like to invite Yang Berusaha Dr. Cik Zuhaida Saari to accompany Emeritus Professor Stephen Freeland to the stage. Please welcome. Now, allow me to briefly introduce our speaker, Emeritus Professor Stephen Freeland. Emeritus Professor Stephen Freeland is a co-founder and principal at Azimuth Advisory, Emeritus Professor of International Law, and former Dean at the School of Law at Western Sydney University and Professorial Fellow at Bond University. He specialized in commercial aspect of space law, public international law, international criminal law, and human rights law. Professor Freeland has represented the Australian government at various United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space UN COPUS meeting over a period of 13 years and has advised the Australian, New Zealand, Norwegian, and other governments in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East on issues related to the national and international regulation of space activity and the development of a national space industry strategy. He has been appointed by UN COPUS as Vice Chair of 5-year Working Group on Legal Aspect of Space Resorts Activities and has been a member of the Advisory Board of the Australian Space Agency since 2019. Among other appointments, he is a director of the Paris-based International Institute of Space Law, IISL, a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on the Future of Space, a member of the Space Law Committee of the London-based International Law Association ILA, and formerly a member of both the Space Law Committee and War Crime Committee of the London-based International Bar Association IBA. He is also been a visiting professional within the Appeals Chamber at the International Criminal Court ICC and a special advisor to the Danish Foreign Ministry in matters related to the ICC. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is now my great pleasure to invite our distinguished speaker, Emeritus Professor Stephen Freeland, to deliver his address. Please welcome him with a round of applause.
There we go. Good afternoon. I didn't realize how tall I was. Firstly, before I welcome you and thank you, I am a little embarrassed because I noticed that on the poster, I'm wearing exactly the same shirt that I'm wearing. I promise you, I own more than one shirt. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you to so many people. Prof, thank you, Firos, to our dear friends at the Innovation Fund. Thank you all for giving me the honour of coming to talk to you all. Thank you all for coming and spending your afternoon to listen to somebody about space law. And I believe we're online, so thank you all to all of the people online. It's such a pleasure to be here. I've heard so much about this university and so much about the wonderful students, and to actually see you in person is wonderful. So I will talk to you a little bit about what we call the wonders of space. I will do that also in the context of this fantastic initiative that this university and the Space Regulator and the Innovation Fund are putting together in terms of the Malaysian Space Law Mooting competition. I'm not sure, some of you may not actually know what I'm talking about when I talk about mooting, so I'll talk a little bit about that. But it's a wonderful initiative. Firstly, let me say that I am fortunate that I give lots of talks around the world about space, and people often say to me that space, that's wonderful, space is the future. And I say to them, yes, you're right, space is the future, but it's also very much the present. Every aspect of your lives, of my lives, of the Malaysian economy and society, every aspect of every country in the world, its critical infrastructure is dependent upon space. So space is today, it's present, it's mainstream. It's not just about the future, although it is about the future, it is about today. And so for those of you who no doubt have the pleasure of being taught about space law by such a wonderful and esteemed, and I must say very kind prof, you are helping yourselves to understand the governance of an area that is so crucial to every aspect of life. You are developing the skills to meet the challenges of the 21st century. So I applaud you, I congratulate you for taking that decision, as I congratulate every student in Malaysia that is also looking to discover the wonders of space law. So hopefully this works if I do that. Yes, look at that. Wow, that's amazing. So space is different. You all know that we talk about, when countries talk about their areas of influence, we talk about land, we talk about sea, we talk about air, airspace. We talk about now cyber, if you like, although that's different from an area, a sphere of influence. Each of those different spheres have peculiarities about them, but none of them, I believe, have the peculiarities and the global significance that space does. I often say that space touches every person on the planet. Every person is impacted by our ability to utilize space and space technology for the benefit of those on Earth. It is no exaggeration to say that if we did not have that capacity to access space, we would all be back in the Dark Ages. The lights would go out, communications would collapse, the financial system would collapse, the transportation system would collapse, the sewage system would collapse, disaster management would collapse, agricultural management would collapse, and I could continue, the list goes on. So it's incredibly important that we have a system of governance to help us to manage this area. Space, from a legal perspective, has a uniqueness about it. It is what we call an area beyond national jurisdiction. So Malaysian law, for example, will apply obviously to the territory of Malaysia. Malaysian law will apply to the waters of Malaysia. Malaysian law will apply to the airspace of Malaysia. But Malaysian law will not apply to the outer space above Malaysia, nor will any country's law apply. Instead, we govern space on a globalized basis under international law. Those doing the mooting competition will discover the joys of that international legal framework, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I have the honor, the rare honor, of being involved at the United Nations level in the continuance of the development of that international global governance framework. It is no exaggeration to say, therefore, that the future of humanity is very much dependent upon our relationship with space. It gives us so many benefits. You may not think about it, but you, each one of you in the room, and myself, will use space 30 times, 40 times today without even thinking about it. It's not just the GPS in your phone. It's about weather forecasting. You would have tried to work out what the weather is. It's about communicating. It's about watching satellite television. It's about any transport that you take. It's about any financial transaction perhaps that you might undertake or your family might undertake, and so many other things. So the important message that no doubt Prof. Shea gives to you is that we need to understand that we must respect space. Because like any area where humans begin to utilize it, if we get that wrong, we will create what some call a tragedy of the commons. That is, this area of space, this wondrous area, which gives us so many benefits, where we all have a freedom of access to. But if we continue in a way that does not respect space, ultimately we will not be able to use it. It will be destroyed, and with that, our lives and livelihoods will be very much destroyed. So, of course, there is so much that is interesting and fun. I mean, who is not interested in space, really? I'm often told by people who have young kids, young children, that young children are always interested in dinosaurs and space. Who is not interested in space? It's got so many wondrous things, but beneath that, there's an incredible imperative that your generation, the young lawyers in the room and those online and then future generations have to understand. You have a responsibility to ensure that we respect this environment that we have and that we can use. And my experience with your country, Malaysia, through my dear friend, the space regulator, Firos, through my dear friend, the Director General of the Malaysian Space Agency, through my dear friend, Prof. J, and many others, Malaysia understands that responsibility, takes it seriously, does everything it can to contribute to a sustainable, peaceful, secure, stable space future. But everybody has to do that. And as you become lawyers, as you go and engage in your practice, keep that message with you. You have a responsibility. It's wonderful that this university is teaching you about these things that will allow you to address the challenges. But with that learning comes a responsibility to make sure that not only your children, but 7 generations forward of children will have the opportunities that we have to utilize space. And so therefore, when we create a governance system for space, we have to ensure that all of the voices that are relevant are heard. As I said, much of the governance framework is developed, agreed, negotiated through a United Nations process. We all understand, of course, what the United Nations is. We all understand, of course, the wonderful foundations about what the United Nations represents. But of course, being pragmatists and being real, we all understand also the challenges that the United Nations has as a political organization. And so it's important to ensure that those countries that negotiate these frameworks do so having heard all of the voices in the room, not just the loudest voices in the room. So what are those voices? Space is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. I've already described some of the ways you use it 30 times a day. It's also incredibly multifaceted, which adds, of course, to its wonder. So what voices are relevant for space? Space is, of course, about science. And space is about exploration. And space is about commerce. And space is, because of the realities of the world, also about military uses of space and about national security. But it's also about culture, who we are, who the human race is, what is our place in the universe. For many people in the world, it's a very spiritual thing. In my country, Australia, our First Nations people who have been on the land that I live for 65,000 years and have often been described as the world's first astronomers. For them, space is just an extension of the ecosystem, and Earth plays a small part in that. And the circle and rotation of life, death, is also reflected in the way they look at space. So it's spiritual. and space is a reflection of humanity and human rights and human dignity. So we have to ensure that all of those voices are heard, not just, as I say, the loudest voices. And again, this is where the responsibility on you falls, to ensure that when Malaysia is speaking on the global forum, it's speaking having heard all of the voices in the room. And so understand what is important and understand the opportunities and the benefits, but also reflect on the risks. My dear friend Faros knows this because I've said it many times over the last 4 days. Space inherently, the way we utilize it, has risks. Geopolitical risks, technical risks, environmental risks, but it can also give us many benefits. And so we have to act in a way that maximizes those benefits for humanity, minimizes those risks. So please understand how multifaceted, how wondrous space is, and ensure that in your thinking you reflect that. I don't want this to be a law lecture, although I know many listening will be participating in a moot, but the global governance of space falls within a much broader aspect of international law. International law is many things, but at its most basic, it is the law that governs the relationship between countries. Malaysia, as a sovereign nation, is part of the ecosystem of international law. Malaysia is a party to many thousands of treaties with many other countries on many issues. International law helps regulate that relationship that Malaysia has with all of those countries. International space law is part of that much broader area of international law, governing the relationship between countries in their space activities. Because space belongs to us all, and space gives rise to benefits for us all, and space and the way we utilize space has impacts on us all. So if one country does something over here on space, that will have consequences over here for everybody else. And so we need to understand and respect those relationships. And I have been urging, and Malaysia does this very well, countries like Malaysia and my country, Australia, who you might describe as a compliment, you know, as sort of middle powers in space. Not the world's leaders, but already with a sophisticated technological basis and an understanding of the importance of governance. There's a responsibility on countries to express that view about how space is to be governed. So space is about countries. It also involves some what we call intergovernmental organizations. Some of you would have heard of the European Space Agency, for example, or the International Telecommunication Union, or other global intergovernmental bodies. But really, space is about states and their activities, and also increasingly how they regulate companies and entrepreneurs and even individuals and universities who themselves want to now engage in space adventures. So you have a set of treaties that Malaysia is moving towards being a party to, which gives Malaysia rights and obligations, which it will, as a good space citizen, absolutely adhere to. But because now Malaysian companies and entrepreneurs also want to engage in space with the deep technological prowess they're developing, you need then, for those private non-governmental entities themselves to be regulated. So, as you heard, Malaysia has passed national space law, Space Act number 834, is that right? I always get the number wrong, my apologies. 834, which is a wonderful, wonderful foundation to help Malaysia and its entities engage in space for peaceful purposes and no doubt for benefit for Malaysia and the Malaysian people, but also more broadly. You have a Malaysian space agency, MISA. You have a Malaysian space regulator, and the space regulator is sitting here. You know, we are honored in his presence. We teach space law now in Malaysian universities. We have companies that are engaged in space. Malaysia is part of this global space ecosystem and is developing its own national space ecosystem. That's inspiring, that's beneficial, but probably not so well known. And so those of you who discover the wonder of space, please, every night at dinner, with your friends, with your family, tell them about space. Tell them how important it is. Tell them how wonderful it is. Tell them about the benefits. Tell them what Malaysia is doing. Explain to them why you need to have law. Explain to them why you need to regulate it. Explain to them why the government is so involved. Because that understanding will then generate more and more interest, more and more innovation, more and more technology, more and more benefits, and more understanding. So where do we find the international rules about space? Again, I don't want this to be a legal lecture. The Mooters will no doubt learn all of this, and you'll learn all of this, of course, from Professor Shea. But we have a series of treaties. Treaties, by and large, are agreements between countries that give rise to, as I say, rights and obligations. And we have other parts of law, which we call customary international law, which reflects the way that all states act, even without a written document, because they recognize that it is the right thing to do. And we also have then another set of instruments, all of which have been developed through the multilateral process of COPOS, this Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space that was mentioned at the beginning, that Malaysia has a strong voice at, that I have the honour of representing Australia and now chairing. And through those multilateral negotiations where every country has the opportunity to contribute, to develop standards that allow us to move forward, we have a whole series of instruments. So what are the laws? Firstly, let me say, if you ever hear somebody say that space is the wild, wild west, or space has no law, get angry with them, or at least educate them. We have a lot of law. And we need to have law because it's so important and so strategic. If you think about how space reflects and our activities, the changes in technology since way back when to now, all of those changes of technology, all of those countries that are engaged, all of those different activities, all of those private organizations that are developing innovative, creative space technology. All of that and those changing paradigms have happened, and yet space continues to work for the benefit of humanity. And it does because we have this foundational framework of law. And I often say, if we didn't have space law, we would have to invent it. And so we have a series of foundational principles represented by a series of treaties, agreements between countries. But then more and more, we also have countries themselves developing their national law. As I said, Malaysia has a national law from 2022, which came fully into force at the beginning of this year, to allow Malaysia to cultivate and develop its own national space ecosystem. So we have many, many treaties, many national laws, and just to demonstrate, these slides will be available later, many other instruments that have been developed. And I have the honor of chairing at COPOS as we try to develop yet another instrument which will deal with the possibility of what we call space resource activities. And inshallah, if we are successful in that, then there'll be another document at the bottom there, and I'll be a very proud person. Yeah, but we shall see. That we have until 2027 to agree that. So all of you have to understand, and I'm sure you do understand, the importance of law and governance and ethics and responsible behavior and culture and all the voices in the governance of space. And please take that message away in your thinking. It is really important. You really represent the future. And space is the present, but it is also the future. And we do not want to go back to the dark ages. We do not want to go back to the dark ages. Imagine your life without your mobile phone. Would you be prepared to live life without a mobile phone? Hands up if you would be prepared to live life without a mobile phone. One person, very good. You would live life without a mobile phone if we ruined space. We would have no internet and so many other things. So maybe that is the most dangerous thing for you, yeah? Imagine life without a phone. So the responsibility is yours. All right. So with that background, let me talk a little bit about mooting. Now, most of you and online would understand what mooting is. In law, part of the skills you learn in law degree, and there are many skills, it's the most empowering, I think, study you can have because it opens the door to so many things. But one of the skills that you develop is the skill of advocacy. You want to be a lawyer who can represent people, represent ideas, represent disadvantaged groups, represent your clients, represent cultures. The most powerful way of representing is by informed, objective, rational, clear advocacy. Advocacy is not arguing. Advocacy is putting forward a position based on informed reasoning. You're not fighting with someone. You are engaging in the art of persuasion. not forcing people to accept what you say, persuading them, bringing them along. And that's what mooting seeks to encourage, this idea of persuasion, this idea that you will speak and people will sit back and they may not necessarily agree with you, but slowly they will understand that what you're saying actually has reason, logic, and persuasive capabilities about it. And so in law, to help encourage people to develop that skill, it's an incredibly important skill. In many subjects, universities create mooting competitions. And so they develop a problem, a written problem, let us say, and they ask you then to advocate on behalf of one of the parties, advocate that problem. So in space law mooting competitions, obviously the problem revolves around something that might have happened in space or with regard to space, but it may involve a whole range of issues. And engaging in mooting, it's a wondrous thing. You know, I asked for this talk to be called The Wonder of Mooting, because I've seen so many students engage in mooting competitions. And the Manfred Lachs Moot Court competition that I have the honour of chairing around the world, typically the students are engaged in that for about a year at least. And you see them at the beginning of that year and they start reading a problem and then they think, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to understand this, let alone advocate? And then you see those students 1 year later and they are inspired and inspiring. They've learnt how to reason. They've learnt how to advocate. They've learnt how to put that reasoning not only in written form, which is incredibly important, but also to be able to speak on their feet. I'm sure all of you are wonderful at speaking on your feet, but it's sometimes quite scary for some. I have my niece has married a really lovely man, and he is absolutely petrified about public speaking. It's the most scary thing in the world for him. But you know what? He likes jumping out of aeroplanes. His hobby is jumping out of aeroplanes with a parachute. How crazy is that, right? I would never, ever choose to jump out of an aeroplane. I'm so scared of that. But you see, different people are scared about different things. But he is petrified. He could never get up and do this, but he would fly you all up to 10,000 feet and then push you all out of a plane with a parachute. Crazy. But you want to be able to learn that advocacy skill. You want to be able to think on your feet. Not just read speeches and scripts, but to think on your feet, to react. Because part of the art of persuasion is understanding the position of the person or persons you are trying to persuade. And they will ask you questions, and you will learn from their questions and try to react. You will learn from their body language, and you will try to react. So you need to be able to learn to not only speak well, but think on your feet and respond without sounding as if you're scared by this question. You may be inside very scared, but it's all about this positivity of persuasion. Every time I speak, and I probably give about 150 speeches a year, for the 10 seconds before I speak, just as I was being introduced by the dear moderator, I close my eyes and I just count backwards from 10. And it just slows my breathing, and it slows my speech, so that I don't start off by talking like this and go, oh my goodness, it's really wonderful to be here, thank you so much, which many people do when they're nervous. Of course, we all get nervous. And so you learn these skills through mooting. You learn to work together, because mooting is generally done by a team. They usually have a coach. Imagine doing that for a year. You are so reliant on your team. You're so reliant on your coach. Of course you will disagree. Of course there will be moments when you feel like, well, I don't know what you feel like doing, but perhaps walking away. But you will learn to work as a team. It's an incredible skill in anything you do, but certainly working as a lawyer. It's an incredible skill to be able to work with people, even, and this won't be the case for you, but even working with people you don't like. It's incredibly important to be able to work with people you don't like, because everybody has something to offer. And even if you don't like the person, or you don't necessarily agree with everything they say, they have something to offer, and you learn from that. And you also try in a respectful way to reflect on your ideas as well. You will learn etiquette. There's a certain etiquette in court. The moots that we have in the Manfred Lachs moot court competition are set in the International Court of Justice, the World Court. Malaysia knows that court well. It has been involved in a number of cases before the International Court of Justice. And so there's a certain etiquette in addressing the judges, Your Excellencies, and there's a certain way of responding. There's a certain discipline. You have to learn to respect the rules. There's word limits, strict word limits in courts. There's time limits for advocacy, although I think I'm probably going over time here, so I'll stop soon. You have to understand those, because that is part of the way the system works. So mooting teaches you so many things: how to formulate your reasoning, how to respond to reasoning by your opponents, which often may be equally well thought out, how to recognize where you have strong points and where you have perhaps less strong points, how to understand who it is that you're advocating to, how to manage your time, how to dissect a problem. Typically, the problems are reasonably complex. You need to work out quite quickly what are really the important points. So some of the tips are on this slide. You will learn this, your coaches will teach you, but clearly moot problems are there with certain claims that have to be addressed. Obviously, you will need to address those. You will need to write in a clear, concise way, no typographical errors. Please, no AI. I mean, maybe AI for correcting grammar if some people need to do that, but please do not use AI. One, it's against the rules, but two, you learn nothing by doing that. Doing a moot is about increasing your skill level. It's not just about winning. It's about hard work and practice and engagement and persuasion. But most of all, it's about fun. But along the way, if you look at those students on day one and then 1 year later, they are completely different people. Completely more confident, more well-rounded, more inspiring and inspired, more curious, more well-versed, more skillful, more ready to take on the challenges. So it's a wonderful thing to do, and I encourage all of you, if it's not space law, to engage in mooting in whatever way, shape or form. So, and I'm sorry about the picture of me that, I always put pictures of me. And see, I have a different shirt on, you can see. So it's been mentioned that there is this competition called the Manfred Lachs Space Law Moot Court competition run by the International Institute of Space Law, which is the IISL, is an organisation established in the early 1960s and is the leading, if you like, professional and academic institution in the world about space law. And I have the honour of being a director and also chairing their moot court competition. That competition began in 1992. Now, why is it called Manfred Lachs? Manfred Lachs was a judge of the International Court of Justice. He's a wonderful, he's passed away now, a wonderful Polish judge, jurist. He also, for a period of time, was the president of the International Court of Justice. And he was a space law nerd. He loved space law. And so in 1992, he was also involved with the International Institute of Space Law. We met with him. I wasn't there then, but the Institute met with him, and the idea was born to have a moot court competition. Began then, has been going on every year since. We now have over 100 teams around the world competing. The world is divided into 5 regions. We have a North American region, which is United States and Canada. We have a Latin American region, all of the countries of Latin America. We have a European region. We have an African region, and we have an Asia-Pacific region. Obviously, Malaysia and Malaysian teams, because the competitors are university teams, would compete in the Asia-Pacific region. So we have 5 regions. We're now being approached by Iranian and Saudi and UAE. So we're thinking, although it still will take some time, to have a 6th region, a Middle Eastern region. And this competition has expanded. So we have over 100 teams around the world competing in those 5 regions. The 5 winners of each region then compete in the World Finals. The World Finals are held every year in a different city in the world to coincide with the biggest space conference. Some call it the Space Olympics, which is a conference called the International Astronautical Congress, coincidentally held this year, a few weeks ago, in my hometown of Sydney. Last year it was in Italy. Next year it'll be in Turkey. The year after that it'll be in Poland. The year after that it'll be in Uzbekistan. So it travels around the world. So the 5 winning teams from each of the regions compete in the World Finals at that IAC. What is so unique, well, there's many unique features about this competition, is that we are the only competition in the world where the final is always judged by sitting judges of the International Court of Justice. Imagine the thrill. This is more frightening than jumping out of an aeroplane, perhaps, for some of you. Yeah? But imagine if you are pleading in front of judges of the International Court of Justice. It happens every year. Here we have a photo. This was in, I think, Bremen. This is quite a long time ago, yeah? But you have on this side, the 3 judges on the bottom. You have a judge from Slovakia, the presiding judge, Judge Shui from China, and then Judge Kokorovkian from Russia. And the judge from Slovakia was Judge Tomka. And there you have some of the institute people involved. This is, I was not involved that year. It is the most prestigious competition in the world. We are so grateful for the gracious support of the ICJ. These judges are so busy. They are so busy. They've never been busier. And yet this year, 2 or 3 weeks ago, they flew from The Hague on the Monday, they got to Sydney on the Tuesday, they judged on the Thursday, they flew out on the Friday, and then they had to sit again on Monday in The Hague. And yet they do it every year. We are so grateful, and it's such a wonderful support for us. But imagine you could be sitting there, standing there, advocating in front of these 3 judges. They're extraordinary, and they love it. They love it. So this year's competition has just come out in August, and the regional finals, the regions will take place, different regions will have it in different months, but usually around April, May, June of next year. This year's problem will be, as you can see, between 2 made-up countries, Inkaton and Arcadia. The case concerning liability and responsibility for space activities of non-governmental corporate actors. Perfect for a Malaysian team. We've been talking about that for the last 4 days in a course that FIROS, that the space regulator has organised. The Asia Pacific round this time will be held in Gujarat, in India. So any Malaysian team that competes will be competing in Gujarat. And as I say, the World Finals will be held in October in Antalya in Turkey. I mean, what a wonderful, wonderful opportunity that is. I know that your space law competition here is the precursor to this. It's a wonderful initiative. And I think I've been told you have 12 teams involved. What an extraordinary thing. I have no favourites, but wouldn't it be great if a USIM team wins, yes? But I have no favourites. We are neutral and unbiased, yeah? But I have the honour of coming back, and I'll be here during that competition in December, and so I hope to see many of you there. This is a photo from the final in Gujarat last year of the Asia Pacific. I had the honour of being one of the judges, and you'll see behind us the finalists were from Singapore and from India, and the Singaporean team prevailed. So that's it from me. Terima kasih. Thank you so much for listening. No. And I apologise, Prof, if I've spoken for a bit too long, but we're all here to answer any questions and happy to talk to you at any time. Again, thank you so much for giving me the honour to speak to you. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your interest in this. And thank you for being responsible, wonderful lawyers, humans in the future. I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Freeland, for the enriching and thought-provoking presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now open the floor for question and answer session, Q&A with Professor Freeland. So if any of you have any question, kindly raise your hand and the committee member will assist with the microphone.
Okay, good day, Professor and Doctor. My name is Farhani. So I have 2 questions. So my first question is, how do the treaties enforce transparency for states, especially when space activity or rockets production can be borderline missile or weapon production? That's the first question. And the second one is related to implementation law. So can treaties be interpreted specifically for the interests of states when they enact an implementation law? For example, when the treaties doesn't specify about any body or organization that's supposed to be liable for anything that happened relate to space crash or anything like that, can the states mention that rather than it is supposed to be a liability bear by states, it's supposed to be a space launching provider? Okay, that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and you have an expert here who no doubt can add what I say. So I've already forgotten the first question. The first question was about transparency. I mean, that is just such a wonderful question. Because of the incredibly important and strategic value of space, it's also, and I didn't mention it as a voice deliberately, but space is obviously highly, highly geopolitically sensitive. We all understand that. And I did mention space has military uses and national security interests, and it's about competition between countries as much as it is about cooperation. But my thesis is, as long as you have foundational principles that we can all agree, you can compete with each other and still respect space. So the antecedents, the beginnings of space technology were, as exactly was stated in the question, the idea of missile technology. And so the early days of space were seen as an extension of missiles. And then in 1957, when we were able at last to send a space object not just into the air to come down, but into Earth orbit, it became something different. It still moved away from just being about, if you like, missile technology to being about satellite technology. And of course, satellites can be used for many purposes, but the treaties do promote peaceful uses, they promote mutual assistance, they promote cooperation, they promote international law, they promote taking due regard of others' interests, all of these things that, of course, aid transparency. But the reality obviously is a little different sometimes, because space is also about national security and military. And so countries are less likely to be transparent on some of those issues. That is just the nature of geopolitics. We understand that. But if we are, as a humanity, to continue to be able to use space, we have to change our thinking about space, because what one country does here will have implications for everybody else. And if one country does things that are very negative towards space, that will impact everybody else, but it will also impact that country itself. There are no winners for bad behaviour. And so countries will need to share more information so that they can work in developing foundational rules and then compete. So they'll never share everything, they'll never be fully transparent, but we're moving away from that thinking of it's just about missiles and military to it's about humanity. It's still about military, but it's equally, and I would say much more, about humanity, and we need to find the right balance. On the second question about implementation in national law, so Malaysia is a party, well, is or is about to become a party to 4 of the 5 treaties, I hope, in the next year, within the next year, and it has obligations under those treaties to do certain things. And part of the obligations it has is to ensure that private Malaysian companies and people who themselves wish to engage in space do so in a proper way. So Malaysia has an obligation to do that, and therefore pass national laws that fully implement that in an appropriate way. Now, Malaysia is doing that, has done that, will do that. But of course, countries can pass any national law they wish, as long as it's constitutional. And every country will have a different national space law because of their different circumstances. And so they might slightly differently interpret their obligations. But in the end, they have obligations, and they have to ensure that all of those activities are done in a proper way. If they don't satisfy their obligations, then they are in breach of international law, with everything that might flow from that. And Malaysia is clearly looking to be a model, exemplar space citizen. And so, obviously, the Malaysian law framework will best reflect the interests of Malaysia and the circumstances of Malaysia, but at the same time will properly implement those obligations. Prof, do you want to add to that?
I think student, they are pressure to hear from you, Prof. And I think there are lots of another questions going to asked. Okay, so I think we proceed to the question because I heard that so many things they want to ask. Okay? So, okay, please.
Please, if you want to add, please.
Sure.
But they're also waiting for you.
So my name is Bella. I have one question to ask, which is, as space activities has become increasingly commercialized, what are the major legal challenges that international space law will face in the next decades?
Oh,
And that's the question. Thank you.
thank you so much. Yes, you're absolutely right. Space is becoming increasingly commercial. The international space economy, commercial economy, last year was, I think, about $600 billion US. It's predicted to become trillions of dollars soon. The space economy continues to grow exponentially, much more quickly than the world economy. During COVID, remember COVID, yeah? We were all locked in our rooms, it was not a great time. The world economy went backwards. There were only 3 industries that grew during COVID. Pharmaceuticals, for obvious reasons. The digital economy, I don't know how you describe it. Netflix, for obvious reasons. And the space economy. So space continues to grow. So yes, absolutely, it's a commercial area as well as a scientific area and many other areas as well. And that was one of my voices. Remember, I said the commercial voice. And the private sector in many countries is leading in the development of innovation and technology. And there are some well-known companies, for example, but not only, in the United States, that have developed incredible technologies of reusable launch vehicles. You've seen them go up and then remarkably come back down and then be used again, which has so many benefits from a cost perspective, from an environmental perspective, from furthering innovation, etc. So the private sector is incredibly important in the development of technology. But, and forgive me for saying this, we must not be seduced by 1 or 2 or 3 individuals. We hear their names all the time. I never mention their names. Their names are not mentioned at the United Nations. Whilst we all recognise the private sector is important because it's the private sector that hires the clever scientists, that can raise money in the capital markets, that can develop the technologies and change direction, that can pivot that can adapt much more quickly than countries can, that can have research and development much more effectively than countries can. So the private sector is developing the technology and obviously working with governments. And if they make money, they make money. But on the really, really big issues of space, it is about humanity and about the world and about the countries that all get together in this multilateral process. So please do not believe that one or two or three companies will dictate the future of the space governance. They may well be very influential in the future of what the activities look like. One cannot deny that. But space is so much more than one or two or three high-profile individuals. And of course, space, as I said before, is about cooperation and peace and humanity. It's not about profit. And so the underlying goals of the international space community are going to be not necessarily in sync with the underlying goals of the commercial community. And the commercial community's goals don't necessarily align with the treaties that we have. So we just have to find ways to ensure that whilst we can benefit incredibly from the innovation of private sector, we still must be faithful to the underlying goals. And that's why Malaysia and others have laws that encourage and enable innovation by the private sector, but still regulate it to ensure that there is a compliance with the fundamental principles that we need to comply with. So it's an excellent question, but I hope I've answered. Thank you.
Yes. It's a wonderful explanation. Thank you. My question would be, early this year that the US President, Donald Trump, has made a statement that the US is proposing to have a golden dome, right? So my question will be that, you know, the proposal to have golden dome is basically to use for military and defense purposes. So the question is that, is it feasible to be done, and is it legal to be done under the Outer Space Treaty? As we all know that the US is a party to the Outer Space Convention. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Wow, what a great question. I promised Firos that I would not mention the name of any world leader in the 4 days, but you've pulled the name out of the bottle. So for those of you who may not be aware, the United States administration, one of the loud voices in the United States, but not only the United States, I'm not criticizing any one country, is the military. And the military, like every other department of government, has to strive for money, right? Governments have a budget, they allocate their money as between different ministries. And by and large, the military come up with, how do I put it? I sound like I'm being critical, and I don't mean it to sound like that, but often you find that on the military side, threats are exaggerated, and the need to develop weapons and weapon systems are exaggerated because they need to come up with these ideas to get the allocation of the money to develop whatever they want to develop. So this is not the only answer, but one of the answers is this is the lobby group of the military saying there's a great threat, we need to protect everything. The only way we can protect it is by having a series of satellites that are defensive. And it's not the first time this has happened. Under the Reagan administration, way back in the 80s, the Reagan administration talked about, some of you might recall, Star Wars. a Star Wars network. Now, is it feasible to have a Golden Dome? I don't know the precise details. I know enough just to be dangerous. I'm not at all a technical person, but technically it brings with it incredible challenges, no doubt. But that's not the only reason it shouldn't happen, right? But so is it feasible? I don't know, but it will take, if it were to happen, many, 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 many years, and there'd be many problems with it technically, and it probably won't achieve what the military say it must achieve. Is it legal? Well, you get 10 lawyers in the room, you're going to get 10 different answers. All I can say, because I have to be a bit neutral given my role at the UN, but if you wanted me to argue that it was not legal, I mean, assume we understand what the plan is, right? I could construct 7 or 8 or 9 arguments to say it is not legal. Now, I may not be right in 5 or 6 or 7 of them, but I may well be right, even if I'm right just in 1 of them. That is enough. So there are certainly arguments that you could make to advocate, but here I would call it argue as well, but advocate the non-lawfulness of that. Of course, on the flip side, if you paid me, I would never do the job because I would refuse. But if you wanted me to construct arguments to say it was lawful, I would probably be able to come up with some arguments as well. Although I would never take on that job, because for me, the most important issue, not the technical challenges, not the legal challenges, but the moral, ethical, and all the other challenges associated with that. Space is no longer an area where initially 2 countries dominated, then 1 country dominated. It's no longer an area where 1 country dominates. It's an area, we talked about this a lot during our course in the last 4 days, it's a multipolar world. There are a number of significant countries with significant space capabilities. If I say I'm going to buy a big gun, you are also going to go say you are going to buy a big gun. The danger of the rhetoric of these things now in a multipolar world is that rhetoric leads to counter-rhetoric, action leads to counter-action. And so if one major spacefaring nation talks about weapons in space and defensive weapons, of course others will react if they're not already doing it themselves, but just not talking about it. You know, I don't want to criticize one particular country because one could argue that others are looking to do the same sort of thing without talking about it. So the danger for us is that not all the voices are heard. Just the loud voices are heard, and therefore we have to be very, very careful about that. So my answer to you is it's not feasible because it would take us on a destructive path. People talk about space war being inevitable. Who talks about space war being inevitable? It's the military. And not all military. I'm not saying the military is bad. Military is great people. But the military will say space wars are inevitable, therefore we need the weapons, yes? Whether it's aggressive or defensive weapons, you know, I never understand what a defensive weapon is. You know, for me, a weapon is a weapon is a weapon. But if we start saying it's inevitable, we're going to have war, therefore we need to equip ourselves with the weapons in the infrastructure, and the others start doing it, and the others start doing it, that continuous talk about inevitability will itself become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so we have to push back. Well, my view, you don't have to agree with me, is we have to push back and say, this is not about winning and losing, because nobody will win if we have that war in space. This is about the future of humanity. And so for everybody who says war is inevitable, you have to have other voices saying that's absolutely not true. And in fact, we should be striving for peace and transparency and cooperation, recognizing that in the end, it's a very strategic and geopolitical area. So talk about military infrastructure, for me, is a very bad sign. But again, I don't want to criticize one country because they're not alone. But you can see it leads us on a downward spiral. That would be my response. I hope that answers your question.
Anyone else, or we have to stop right here? MC? One more. All right. One more, please.
Hello and good afternoon, Professor. Thank you for the wonderful sharing. And to Dr. Cik Zoida, thank you for organizing this talk. My name is Ilhami, and my question for today is there such a thing as space crime? If that is, how would it be handled legally? Does any country's law or the international law recognizes crimes that happens beyond Earth? So that is my question. Thank you.
So your question is about what happens if humans commit a crime in space? Is that what you're about? Okay. Everybody loves that question, right? Everybody loves that question. Humans are humans, right? Humans are fallible. We're not perfect. So to the extent humans go into space, they will bring their fallibilities with them. Imagine if you were in a capsule with me for 18 months flying to Mars, right? I would drive you crazy, yeah? You would want to kill me, yeah? Understood. Humans bring their fallibility with them. So humans in space will themselves be under incredible pressure and stress because clearly it's a stressful environment. No matter whether you're on a capsule, on a space station, if we have human habitation on the moon, let us say, or whatever. So if we go forward 100 years from now, let us say, let us assume we have humans permanently living on the moon. And they then begin to have children, etc., and whatever. Humans will do what humans do. They'll want to get married, they'll want to have children, they'll want to kill or commit crimes. Yeah? And so we will need to work out a legal framework to govern that. And we don't have that yet, but we'll have to work out what law will apply to permanent presence of humans, let us say, on the moon. As an interim, we've had humans in space on a continuous basis since about 2001, I think, on the International Space Station, yeah? The International Space Station, probably the largest and most complicated infrastructure in the world. It's got many countries that are partners, and we've worked out a system on an ad hoc basis to satisfy that about what law applies within the International Space Station. And without going into too much detail, essentially, if you're in the Japanese module, Japanese law applies, and then if you float into the American module, American law applies, and if you float into the Russian module, it's Russian law. You get the idea, yeah? Float into the European one, it's actually 11 countries' laws. And if you do a spacewalk and you grab onto the arm that Canada has reduced, if you commit a crime while you're hugging the Canada arm outside, then Canadian law will apply. So we've worked out on an ad hoc basis for that particular. So we recently had a situation where a an astronaut allegedly, whilst on the International Space Station, an American national, whilst in the American module, allegedly, although it was shown that she didn't actually do this, but allegedly hacked into her former partner's bank account and stole money. Now, it didn't happen in the end, but that would be a crime under US law. So it was pretty clear that the relevant law that governed that act would have been American law. One, by virtue of her nationality, and two, by virtue of the fact that she was in the American module, so American law applies. So, you know, we can sort that out. We've had other questions about it, but it will become far more complex because humans will continue to do what humans continue to do. And so it's a very good question. It's one of the issues we need to work out. I mean, I've written a lot about this, and if you're interested, if you contact me, I'd be happy to send you some papers, but you don't want to read my papers. You can work it out for yourself, yeah? But you're welcome if you would like. But of course, you know, wherever humans go, crime follows, sadly. You know, good things go, but crimes will follow. The question is, crimes under what law? Because maybe acts that I do here may be crimes under Malaysian law, but if I did the same thing, let us say in Australia, it may not necessarily be a crime, and vice versa. So we will need to work out what law applies, because, as I said, Malaysian law does not apply to space. It might apply within a Malaysian satellite for other reasons, but not in space. So if we're going to have more and more humans in space, we'll have to actually agree and construct the relevant law, and then that will dictate what the crimes are. But sadly, we will have to address this at some stage. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Professor, and thank you to all participants for the engaging discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, to officially mark the conclusion of this program, it is now my pleasure to invite Yang Berusaha Dr. Muhammad Fairuz Asilam, Malaysia's Space Regulator MOSTI, to deliver the closing remark. Please welcome him with a round of applause.
It is a lovely discussion when we discuss law in space. Let's imagine when we are on Earth, and then we are celebrating fasting month and the 8th because we observe moon. Can you imagine one day we develop a mass colony in the next 50 years maybe, and there are two moons, Phobos and Deimos. So how can we react? Which moon that we observe to determines the date of fasting and the days of Eid. Same thing happen if we are on moon. Which moon we would like to observe? So this kind of discussion is very good to all of us. It make our mind explore, and space is also one of the elements. The most important is space exploration. So let me start with the conclusion remark. Emeritus Professor Stephen Freeland, Yang dihormati Dr. Cik Zuaida, distinguished guests, lecturers, and dear student of space law, it is a true honor to be with you today, celebrating knowledge, ambition, and the future of space governance in Malaysia. And space is no longer a distant dream. It is an emerging domain of law, ethics, and responsibility. As the world faces growing challenges, orbital congestion, debris, and competition for resources, We must see them not as barriers, but as opportunities. When others see risks, you as a student must see a responsibility. When others see complexity, you must find clarity through law. You are the generation that will translate legal principle into action, ensuring that space remain peaceful, sustainable, and fair for all. At the Space Regulatory Division, bahagian penguasa angkasa, under MOSTI, our vision is to make Malaysia a credible and responsible spacefaring nation and toward achieving Malaysia Space Exploration Plan 2030. Through the Malaysian Space Board Act, Act 834, we are building the foundation for safe, transparent, and sustainable activities in space. And to support your growth, I am pleased to announce that Space Regulatory Division will offer one internship placement in 2026, next year, open to space law and policy student of USIP. So this is your chance to gain hands-on experience to see how law and policy operates in the real space regulation. The opportunities in this field are expanding fast, from legal officer and corporate counsel to the international negotiators, academics, and compliance experts. Soon, ASEAN and the global community will need lawyers who understand both the Earth and the space and the orbit above it. Your expertise will help Malaysia take its rightful place in the global space community. I am proud that Malaysia will host its first ever National Space Law Moot Court competition from 5th to 7th December 2025, organized by Space Regulation Division, Universiti Sains Islam Malaysia, and Yayasan Inovasi Malaysia. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank especially to USIM and Dr. Cik Zuraida as the director of the Mooting competition, and USIM play a vital role to make sure this competition success. The champion will go to represent Malaysia in the Asia Pacific Manfred Lachs Moot Court Competition 2026, where Prof. Steven stated that the program will be in the Gujarat next year, and we will standing among the world brightest young legal mind. This is not just a competition. It is a movement to build Malaysia next generation of space lawyers. So I urge you, take part, be bold, and make history. Our journey continues. On the 25th of November 2025, another 1 month, Space Regulatory Division and Universiti Sains Islam Malaysia with Yayasan Inovasi Malaysia will organize another important talk entitled Strengthening Global Space Governance, Insight from United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs and the Manfred Lachs Space Law Moot Court. We will welcome Madam Rosanna Hoffman, Head of the Global Space Law Project and the Secretary of UN-WUSA Working Group on Legal Aspect of Space Resource Activity, as well as Secretary of the Expert Group on Space Situational Awareness. So she will share his experience, and she also a Mootus previously. You can even invite former Manfred Lachs Moot Court competition participants from abroad. Your colleague, please invite them to learn from them, to connect with them, and to build your international network. Space Regulatory Division will fully support these activities, and maybe Prof. Steven also can help us to identify the Mootus that experience in the Manfred Lachs Moot Court competition. The most urgent global topic today is space sustainability, and I believe Universiti Sains Islam Malaysia can champion this. Organize talk, debates, and research on how the law can support sustainable space operation. Let's bring this discussion into mainstream media so Malaysia will understand why space law matters. Our future in orbit depends not just on rockets, but on the legal framework that make them safe, secure, and just. Success doesn't belong to the strongest, but to those who refuse to give up. Like the pioneer who launched rocket against all odds, you too must keep going even when things seem uncertain. Space law in Malaysia is still relatively young, but it is growing because of your belief and participation. You are already part of something bigger, a new chapter in Malaysia, a national development story. Before I conclude, allow me to express my deepest thanks to Emeritus Professor Stephen Freeland. Thank you for your traveling to Malaysia and sharing your vast knowledge and experience. We are truly privileged to learn from one of the world's finest, the chair of the UN Kupos Working Group on the legal aspect of space resource and the chair of International Institute of Space Law Moot Court Committee. Thank you. Terima kasih, Professor. To University Science Islam Malaysia, especially Dr. Cik Zuraida and the USIM team, thank you for your partnership and dedication. May our collaboration grow stronger as we work for PMPA 2025 and future space law initiative. And finally, to all of you, students, thank you for your energy and curiosity. You are the hope of this nation. Terima kasih. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fairuz, for the meaningful and supportive closing speech. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we move to our next segment, token of appreciation, we would like to extend our warm invitation to Yang Berusaha Dr. Muhammad Fairuz Asilam and also Encik Muhammad Amir Rizal Bidin, Vice President of Yayasan Inovasi Malaysia, to kindly come up on the stage together with Emeritus Professor Stephen and also Dr. Cik Zuraida for the token of appreciation. Please welcome. As a gesture of our deepest gratitude, we would like to invite Yang Berusaha Dr. Cik Zuraida Sahari to present the token of appreciation to Emeritus Professor Stephen Freeland, our speaker today.